Hi, and welcome to my rotoscoping video part 2. In this tutorial I'm going to continue to show you how to rotoscope and create mats using motion tracking so you can put them into a program for roto painting to create a Depthmap video for a stereo conversion. So what we want to do is pull up Mocha Pro. And well, you're thinking, well, this is kind of complicated. Well, actually, it's not really as complicated as you might think. And I know a lot of people might think that, well, am I going to be able to pull this off? Well, some people might not be able to do this. Some people might. Some people might not want to do this. One thing that I should mention first is that before you attempt to mess with this program, be sure to read the manual. To do that, all you have to do is go up to Help and click on Offline Help, and the PDF manual will load up. A few other things I should tell you before we get started is there is no such thing as a perfect roto, and not all objects can be tracked automatically. So let me go ahead and get this going. Go to New Project, choose. I have already completed this, so I'm going to start a new one. I'm going to show you a clip out of Tron. Now right here it shows the frame range. This is how many frames that it has. From 4,000. This is at the point in the movie. The clip 4,032. And this scene ends at 4,084. Make sure your frame rate is the same as the video that you are converting. Make sure you choose HD, and if it's progressive scan, make sure this says separate fields off. If you don't have a progressive scan, you can select which field it is by upper or lower first. Over in advanced, this is if you want to use a time code instead of a frame number, and if you want it to be offset, the default is 0 or 1 if it requires that, if the clip does require that. You don't need to change any of this stuff here if you don't want to. I guess that's for project save locations. Yeah. Yep, that's exactly what that's for. I never noticed that before. Okay, you click OK, and it loads up the clip. Okay, now you're thinking, well, how in the world am I supposed to create a depth map out of this? Well, you can either do each frame, or not, well, yeah, frame, each photo, each frame is a photo, individually by drawing your shapes around the objects that you wish. And in order to do that, you would have to draw the shapes for every single one of them. Not all at once though. Each individual shape, like say you want to make this little spot on his helmet to pop out towards the camera from the helmet. Well, you would want to create a shape around this, and then you'd want to come down to the layer properties for where it gets cut off, the spline. You want to set the in, which is probably already set for the first one, and then for the out you'd want to set it to the first frame, because it's frame 1 right here. There's 53 frames in this. And in case you're wondering, you can cycle through them by either playing the clip. It looks like it's a video, doesn't it? Well, it's not. It's loading each individual frame one by one in real time. You can also take this and drag it, or you can use your scroll wheel up and down. Okay, by hitting Z, you can zoom in, zoom out. X allows you to move it around. The whole point of this is so you can zoom in and create a spline. So let me go ahead and get started. You got your X splines and then your B splines. This is to add splines to the layer for X splines. This is to add B splines to the layer. Each time you hover over one of these, a little bitty window pops up and tells you what it is. Add bezier spline to layer. This says create a bezier layer tool. Basically, this is the tools that you're going to be using to create your mats. This little thing is to link a layer to another if you want to do that. This is to select one spline. This is to select both splines, the inner and edge points together at the same time. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this one because X splines are easier to track, and you just start selecting the object. Doesn't matter if you're super perfect or not, it really isn't going to make a bit of a difference. Okay, you right click in order to complete the spline when you're done. Okay, well now what do you do? Well, you think, well, how am I supposed to track this? Well, you don't want to track this just yet because, well, this looks a little sloppy. You want to make a little bit of adjustments. You can select any individual spline. Well, what about the edge? It looks like they're kind of pointy. Well, in order to fix that, you can either select them all like this. They're all highlighted in red. Or with this little cross, you can right click on that, go to selection, and select all in the spline. You grab a hold of one of these, any one of them will work. The blue tangent rather, and you can either do this by pulling away from it and making the points even pointier, or if you want to create a sense of roundness, you push them in. If you go too far, it pushes them back out. So you want to just go into the red dot, to the inner spline. Well, it's still not quite right. You have to do a little bit more adjusting. So each one of these can be individually pulled. You want to make it look as nice as you possibly can. It's never going to be perfect, unfortunately. Make it look a little bit smoother. That doesn't look too bad. Okay, now when it comes to the tracking of this, you have 5 different selections: perspective, shear, rotation, scale, and translation. Well, if you're wanting to check all motions, you would want to check every single one of these. Unfortunately, if you're only wanting to do one at a time, like say if you just want to do perspective, this program doesn't allow that. If you uncheck, well, you can't uncheck translation, that's default. But if you're just wanting to do that and that, it won't let you. It forces you to do all of them. That's kind of a drawback with this program. But if you're wanting to go ahead and track all that, just experiment, you can. You can also track the amount of motion. If there's a large amount of motion to be tracked, you select the large motion. If there's a smaller amount, you select the small motion. If you want to manually track, you can click on that. And whenever you come over to here, this will track one frame forward in each frame, one at a time. This will track them backwards. This is automatically track backwards. This is automatically track forwards. If you want to stop tracking, hit the stop button. That stops it at the current frame that you're on for the tracking. Now if you want to see how this looks when you go to track it, you click on the track button. It will track every single frame. It will follow the movement of the object. Okay, and once that's done, you want to zoom in a little bit, and you want to kind of go back and forth to see how well it tracked. As you can see, it's not 100% perfect, so you have to do a little bit of adjusting. You notice it kind of skewed up a little bit here. Like I said earlier, there is no such thing as a perfect track or roto. This even kind of got way out of place. So you just have to adjust it manually a little bit. Doesn't have to be a whole lot, just a little bit. There is no way that you can get this thing perfectly accurate unless you like really nitpick at this stuff. You just want to make it as nice and neat as you possibly can. And cycle backwards through the track. And that doesn't look too bad. Looks pretty good. If you are having trouble with this thing bouncing around everywhere, you want to click on the stabilize button up here and then retrack it, and it will ever so slightly stabilize the spline to the video. Don't always have to do that, but if it's bouncing, if you got like a piece right here that's bouncing around like crazy, that's what you would do to help stabilize that out. It's not 100% foolproof, but it does come in handy and it does help. Okay, well now you're thinking, well, how in the world am I supposed to get this thing into a depth map? Well, this is what it looks like when you turn on the mat. All the stuff underneath this region here got tracked. And you can take this shape and you can export it to another program for map painting. You can also turn off the RGB layer. Actually, I think that's the RGB layer. This is actually this color of this can be changed. That's basically what that's for. Made a mistake on that. Oops, it's been a while since I messed with this program. If you're wanting to change the layer, or not change the layer, but change the color of the layer, you can even change the color of the spline too. You pull this up, and the spline is defaulted to red. Well, say if you want a white spline, or a blue spline, you can change the color so that it suits your needs in case you're having trouble remembering. I normally don't change this at all. You can also change the color of the mat. See how I changed the red? Now you cannot do this to paint it. It will not work that way, because I've already thought about that and it doesn't work. Change it to any color you need to help you remember which colors get painted what shades of white to black for your depth map. I just assume leave it on the default, but you can go ahead and choose any ones you want. Okay, now that we're done with this, come over to here, lock your layer. When you do that, you cannot change this in any which way. It will not allow you to do any type of editing to it. Want to turn off your tracking, and if you want to, you can turn off the spline. And make sure you name your splines. This program is also a little different when it comes to the creating a new layer. Every time you create a spline, or every time you go to draw a new spline around an object, it automatically creates a new layer. And the same thing with Photoshop with the layer properties, or not the layer properties, but the layer order. That does matter, especially when you're going to export your shape data. Let's see here, helmet, well, let's say helmet left. Left wing. That way you know exactly what that spline goes to. Because when you come over to here to create a new layer, you're going to want to change this to a different one. But you're going to still want to name it helmet wing, but instead it's going to be the right wing. If you prefer not to see this, just make sure you turn your mats off. If you want to see both mats at the same time, on the drop menu, select all mats. Then you also have to have it turned on over here. It's been a while since I messed with this thing. Eventually, all this will be lit up. I go ahead and turn that off, turn the mat off, and you can see the object beneath it. This allows you to adjust it easier. You don't need to be perfect, unless you absolutely want to be. I don't usually worry too much about it. And you're pretty much ready to track this. Now, if you don't want to track with every single possible way to track it, turn them all off and just use the translation and click on track. It tracks an awful lot faster, but as you can see, it is not as accurate of tracking. If you go back to your keyframe, which is the very first frame that it started tracking from, you can go and turn them all back on and retrack it. If you want to just track one forward, it'll go one forward. Track them all, and you see it changes the spline shape. It was actually a little bit more accurate earlier. Every time you make a change, you have to retrack it, or else your spline is going to remain the same. Okay, now, well, it's a little too big, so select it by that, or you can just select it all by doing select all on the spline. And you can change the size of the spline. You can also rotate it. If you come up to here, this says rotate. You can hold down W to rotate it. See how this goes with that little circle? You can left click and pull it out. You can rotate it whichever direction you want. Go any which way. You want to rotate it. Okay. You come over to here. This is the scale. You hold down E to activate. With all the splines still selected in red, you hold down E. The circle comes up. You can either go the direction of the arrow, it makes it bigger. The other direction makes it smaller. Say we want it about right there. Hold down W again. Rotate it just a smidge. And with the crosshairs like that, you can move it. See, it's a little bit closer, but not quite. Now this requires a manual adjustment to this. And just remember, it's not going to be perfect, and you can take your time with this to get used to the program. Now you want to go ahead and track backwards. This will get it more accurately. It's not going to be 100% perfect, but it was a lot better. Now you want to go and try and find out where all the mistakes were made. Seems like right there is where it really messed up. You don't want to select all of the splines this time. You just want to select a few and pull it down a little bit. That's not quite where I want it. That's not too bad. You go ahead and Move it a little bit to see how accurate it is. It's still not 100% perfect, but it doesn't need to be. If you're worried about this little bit right here and all this lining up, then go right ahead and adjust all that. See, it's skewed down a little bit farther. Pull that back up. Tuck this in just a smidge. Doesn't need to be perfect. Go backwards a little bit to see how well it works. That doesn't look too bad. Go forward a little bit. Still a little off right there. Just a smidge off, not a whole lot. And there you go. That's about as good as you're going to get it. I mean, you can probably play with that for hours to get that to work. But it's still going to look this not too much different than that. Okay, now that we got that one done, you go ahead and lock that layer, turn off your tracking. You can turn off the spline if you want, you don't have to, and then make sure you name it. Okay, now that you're done with the wings, you can go to the helmet. Select another spline and start your tracing. If you need to zoom in a little bit more, hit your Z, zoom in by the mouse going up, and you can see how the helmet kind of drops down a little bit. Doesn't need to be 100% perfect. Now press X to move the screen so you can see what you're doing. It's easier to zoom in to do this than it is to do it from a zoomed out point, because you can be quite a bit more precise in where you place the spline. Okay, make sure you right click when you're done with your spline positioning, or not positioning, but want to complete the loop, the spline loop. Make sure you select them all and go ahead and do that to round everything off. Now you're going to want to go back through the spots that you don't want to be rounded off and readjust them a little bit. Make sure that they're got points where they need to be, and round areas where they need to be round. Doesn't need to be perfect, of course, but you're just trying to get it as accurate as possible. So like right here, that doesn't look so hot, so you want to adjust that. Now this one, I can tell you already right now that it's going to be advanced. This, well, really shouldn't say advanced, but more complicated in order to do this particular object. Yeah, it's pretty good looking, so let's go back, and for this one you'll want to add perspective too, and I would personally, because of how much junk is moving around with this helmet compared to the other stuff, I would go ahead and just turn on your stabilize. And because you have already done some tracking, the layer order has to be adjusted now. Everything at the top of the layer order is closest to the camera. Everything at the bottom of the layer is farthest away from the camera. So since this new layer that you're creating is below these wings of this helmet, you need to have it, or it's not below, it's behind. You need to make sure that you move this to the bottom of the layer or else your current tracking data for these splines that you've already done will spoof the tracker and will throw this helmet track way off. This will improve the track. It's not going to be perfect, but it will be improved. It will kind of like ignore these tracks. Go ahead and click on track forward. See how it's already going a little off? Like I said, it's not 100% foolproof and it's not 100% automated, which is the reason why it takes hundreds of people and a lot of time to break down every single scene and rotoscope for a stereo conversion. It's why it takes them good years so to get these done, and well, some of them don't look that great because the companies don't want them to spend all this time on them to make them shine, you know. But then you got people who complain about it. Well, if you don't want people complaining, take more time with them. If people are complaining that it's taking too long, well, then explain to them that this is what it takes to do this the right way, or quit converting and start shooting in 3D. Okay, now that we got that done, and you can definitely tell that's way off, make sure you turn off your stabilize, because you don't want that to throw anything off while you're trying to move around. And you're going to have to go through this and adjust every single piece here. That's the only way to get around this. Yes, it's a very tedious task, and I'm just going to show you a little bit of how to adjust it. It's not going to be a perfect adjustment, but this is basically what you're going to be doing. This is why a lot of people do not like to do this stuff, because it is a serious pain. And also, another thing I forgot to mention is that when you're working with finished video, it is even more of a pain. When you're working with the raw footage of, say, the original reel, the master copy, it's a lot easier because you don't have all the filters applied already, and you can see everything. And dark spots is a real pain to see where the object is that you're trying to roto to create your mats. See, this is already taking a very long time to do, and I'm already getting irritated by this. And you know what? I actually did make a mistake. I made a pretty big mistake here. The mistake that I made was that I forgot that I didn't have to put this right here around this portion of the helmet, or this. I could have skipped that completely. So let me just go ahead and redo this. I'm going to go ahead and back to my keyframe. I'm going to go ahead and delete this layer. Oops, not duplicate. Delete selected. Oh no, it's gone. Well, easy way to fix that is just redo it. Go ahead and zoom in a little bit. Now this is what I intended to do. Wasn't thinking quite clearly. You can just skip right over that because you've already done the map for that, and it's not necessary to redo it. It can actually mess it up if you try and go over it a second time. I've done that a few times and I'm like, oh man, I gotta redo all that. You also do not want to take on long scenes. Split them up. It will slow the program down, and you will also have a more of a difficult time creating your splines and your roto work. You will get frustrated way too quickly. I've had to split up a scene a few different times in order to be able to get it to work. Okay, select that, round it out, zoom in so I can do my adjusting. Pull it down a little bit. That doesn't look too bad. Took it in just a smidge. Don't worry about stuff like that. especially in this clip, it's not going to make any difference. Okay, because I'm limited on the amount of time on this thing, I'm not going to show you exactly how to do everything. It's not really that difficult to figure out. It only took me a month to do all this stuff. I mean, not this scene, but it took me a month to figure out how to do all this stuff. Still don't know it 100%, but this is kind of like a rough view of one way you can do it. Another way you can do it is track the shape, and once you get good tracking data, you can roto all the shapes and add to the tracking data that you've created. And you come down here to link the track, and you link it to whatever the track layer is, and you don't have to worry about tracking every single layer. That doesn't work at every single scene, but with a lot of scenes it should work with no problems. So that means that all you'd have to do is just track one particular object like the helmet and add like your wings to it, add that to the roto, do a helmet roto and add that to the helmet track, and it just saves you a little bit of time, but it doesn't always work. It'll probably work a little bit better, and you know what, I did it again. I did it over here. I didn't want to do it that way. Here, let me show you another quick way you can fix this. I just realized this. All you have to do is just come over to here. On that selection, you don't want to delete the layer. Okay, don't want to delete the spline either. You want to go to the points. You want to deactivate that point. Well, not deactivate either. Let me see here. Well, it's supposed to... There it goes. You want to delete the point. Go to that. Whoops. Delete the point. And delete the point. That puts it back the way how I want it. And we're ready to track again. Okay, I'm not going to go through and bore you with all the adjustments necessary to fix all this, because it's going to take an awful lot of time. I'm just going to go ahead and move on. I'll go ahead and turn that layer off, and I'm going to go to the next layer, and you want to do the nose. Okay, now if you notice, I did this spline at the end of the video. Well, now you're going to have to, because I forgot about that, I'm going to have to track it backwards. Because there is no other tracking information or roto work around this besides the helmet, and it's not overlapping on the helmet, you don't need to change the layer yet when you go to track it. You just need to go and hit the track button. Okay, now that that's done, you want to go ahead and reposition some of these, make it look a little nicer. Doesn't need to be 100% perfect. And that looks okay. Now start scrolling through it, see what it looks like. Doesn't look too bad. And make sure you turn your stabilize off. See how it changes a little bit when you do that? It doesn't follow the track. Okay, now the nose mat is created. Nose. Go ahead and do that. Forgot to turn that one off. Actually, I'm probably just going to go ahead and delete this because it's not perfect. But this is just for demo purposes. Okay, now that that's done, I want to do the face. I'm going to speed things along here. And you notice how I'm going kind of outside of the face? There's a reason for that. I will show you that here in a little bit. Okay, now that that's ready, you can go ahead and zoom out if you want, and I'm going to go ahead and put that below because you have, remember, you got a nose here, so the mat is going to show up. See how this is brighter than this one? This is above it. This is closer to the camera than his face. Now if I put the nose down, it won't be like that. Well, usually this changes it a little bit, but apparently it's not going to do that right now. Sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. It makes this look like it's behind it and throws it off, but apparently it's not doing it right now. But you want to make sure that the nose is kept above that. The object that you're tracking, this is the face, it needs to be below the nose because this particular track will spoof this track. I track it forwards. Another thing I'd like to point out is that you definitely need to break down your tracking, or not just your tracking but your rotos. Do not roto too big of an area. It will slow the program down. It may also not get a complete track because of that. That doesn't look too bad. I mean, it's a little off right here. So we'll go ahead and do that. And one thing I did forget to do, I forgot all about smoothing. Getting your object a little round. It's a little off right there, closing the gaps. Doesn't look too super bad. If you want, you can track that backwards with the adjustments made. Okay, now that that's done, take a look at it and see how badly off it is. Doesn't look too badly off. Looks pretty accurate. So you can go ahead and turn off the tracking, lock the layer, and name this. And now you want to do the body. Now technically, if you take a look at this, you'll notice that the right shoulder is moving over the body. Well, you'll want to create a spline for this. I'm just going to go ahead and do this as quickly as possible, not being accurate because I'm kind of pressed for time. Just want to give you a rough example of how this is supposed to work. Okay, and now that there isn't anything to interfere with that, you can just go ahead and track that. Yeah, I know it doesn't look that great, but once you adjust it, it'll look just fine. Turn on your mat to make sure it turns on. Sometimes it doesn't want to turn on when you click on the mats. If nothing shows up, that means you have to redo the tracking information. Go ahead and lock that. Turn it off. I'm going to put that down below. Go ahead and change this to, I don't know, right shoulder. Whoops. Yeah, couldn't tell. I couldn't see it very well. Okay, now you want to do the rest of the body. Again, not being accurate because this is for demo purposes. You can go all the way down here if you wish to. It's not going to matter. It's still going to show up whenever you go to do your roto paint. This will just get cut off when you finish the video. Okay, now you want to drag this down below the right shoulder. Click on this, and since it's at the end of the clip, you want to track it backwards. This will take more time because it's got more data to go through. Hey, you see, if you were really being serious about it, well, if I was really being serious about this, you'd want to adjust that, adjust all this, tuck it in a little bit. Just for example purposes, folks, that's all this is. Okay, now that that's done, lock the layer, turn off tracking, name it, turn off the spline. Zoom back out, and if there was a helmet here, you'd pretty much be done with that. That was the body. Now you want to draw a line for the background. Create a spline for this wall right here. Get it as accurate as you can. If you have to, do this, whoops, and sharpen them up, sharpen the points up. Okay, bring this down, and you don't need to use anything but translation on this clip. And track it forwards. Okay, now that that's done, lock the layer. Turn off the tracking, name it. That's of course after you've gotten all your splines adjusted, and make sure that it's adjusted correctly, and you move on to the next one. You can either come down to here or not, doesn't really matter. The body's going to cover over. Make sure that you move this new layer down. Turn off the other one. Make sure it's just translation and track it. Oops, track it backwards because that's the end of the clip. Now you see how it's the spline is kind of dropping down with the motion of the helmet. The reason why that's doing that is because I didn't leave the helmet spline here. So this is data that has not been tracked permanently. I deleted the spline, which also deletes your tracking data, and it's spoofing the tracker. It's finding this motion. It's not just tracking the background, it's also tracking the helmet movement right here. Even though I do have face and nose, that's not spoofing as bad. If I would have had that right here, if that information would have stayed there, if I would have left it there, it would have been fine. So now that that's done, go ahead and lock the layer, name it. Remember, this is just for example purposes. Create a new layer, draw a spline. To create the new layer, you draw a spline. Sharpen the points up. Drop it down. You only need translation. Track forward. Larger surface requires more tracking time. Okay, now it's done. Name layer. Turn off the spline. Do another one for this wall back here. Not really worried about how it looks, just wanting to show you how to do this. Drop it down. Translation. Track backwards since I was at the end of the clip. Here you see how it's skewing way off. It's because I didn't take any time with any of this stuff right here to make sure it was precise and accurate. It threw the tracker off. You don't have to be 100%, but it needs to be as accurate as you possibly can. Not going to worry about the position of that right now. Now you want to do the background. Just go ahead and do it like this. Drag this down, translation, and track forward. I'm going to go ahead and stop it. That's basically what you need to do in order to be able to create a depth map. Even though this isn't the program that you create the actual depth map or paint the depth map in, this allows you to create individual maps for the objects. And when you keep your layer order and you put them all together in the layer order and you export them to another program for map painting, it allows you to create a depth map video. Now what I'm going to do is, since I've already done the clip, I'm going to go ahead and open the project. This is the one that I did earlier. I'm not going to save any of that. It's going to load the project. Whoops, that's the wrong one. That's a project I've already done. Yep, wrong one. Sorry folks. That's a past scene. What in the world here? Ah, there it goes. This is what I did earlier. Turn on every single spline. See how it all lights up? I went through this earlier and made sure that everything was nice and accurate. Turn on all your mats, and you got your background. Well, they didn't say. Oh, okay, well, program sorry about that. It didn't save my background. I thought that it did. I guess not. Well, anyways, whenever I go to put the background in there, you'll see a white mat behind there. Mat here, 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 and all these other spots. These right here will be first. Then this will be next. The nose will be on the same layer as the helmet. Then you got the face. Then you got the right shoulder here. Then you got the body, which is slightly behind the shoulder. Then you've got the walls. The walls are basically on the same layer, so they'll pretty much be painted the same. And then this will be painted ever so slightly different from this because they're behind it. And then you got your background, and you paint that accordingly. Let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and turn off those mats. I am going to go ahead and do the wall now. I don't know why I didn't save it first time. Okay, now I'll bring this down, turn that off, and go ahead and track it. Yeah, this program tends to be a little bit on the buggy side, but it works better than the previous version of Mocha Pro. The previous version was loaded with so many bugs that it was almost not usable. Once I switched over to this one, it worked a lot better. Even the tracking was considerably improved. A lot of the tracking in the previous version, it just simply wouldn't track some objects. They made it a little bit more precise, and high-speed tracking worked a lot better. And since I've already seen where the positioning of this mat for the background is, I'm not going to have to adjust the track at all. It's pretty much going to be ready once it's finished. And there we have it. Go ahead and name it background. And now when I turn the mat on, you get the background. Okay, this concludes part 2 of how to rotoscoping for Mocha Pro. Thanks for watching.